Hey everyone, my name is Ian. I'm a licensed professional counselor and a certified Catholic pastoral counselor. I wanted to make this video and offer some strategies and tools to move toward true liberation from compulsive acting out sexually, mostly related to pornography. Um, and I'm going to lean heavily on some of the aspects of the 12-step recovery movement, which started in the 1930s from a group of folks who were desperately addicted to alcohol. And in spite of many treatment options that were available at that time, they just were chronically relapsing, and they came across some ideas about the application of a spiritual orientation and developed specific steps to consummate a spiritual awakening and personality change that was what they would call, and I agree with, to this day, true miracles of healing, uh, where these folks were the alcohol obsession that gripped them for years, through an application of a spiritual principle and actions, it was relieved. It was taken away. They were like sort of healed, so to speak, and not a one-time thing. This is why, even to this day, if you walk into a meeting anywhere in the world, you will likely hear people who if they were to acknowledge their time of sobriety, it would be several decades. Like, they haven't drank in several decades, because what they will say is that they're not cured. They have a daily reprieve based on their spiritual condition. So it's the establishing of a spiritual condition, and then a maintenance of the spiritual condition. And part of the maintenance of the spiritual condition is being available to be of service to other people, particular in general, but particularly to people who are still continuing to struggle with addiction. The 12th step is to carry, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of doing these steps. So these steps consummated a spiritual awakening, and now they look to help other alcoholics who are still suffering, and to practice the principles in all of the affairs. So the step 12 isn't a graduation; it's like a continuation, a lifelong commitment to service. Um, so with in regard to sexual compulsion, like I mentioned, primarily the issue that's afflicting a lot of young people is internet pornography use and masturbation. Somebody said that recently. I was listening to a commentator. They said that, that's the way it's usually stated. A person watches porn, but the commentator pointed out that it's not typical that a person watches porn. A person doesn't usually watch porn like they watch a movie. They're masturbating to porn. So it is watching other people perform sexual acts on video, and then masturbating to it. So it's it's like a mental fantasy of being in that scenario. And like I said, it's been this video. I'm hoping to put out this information to possibly help people who find themselves, what you would say, like, in the grip of this compulsion, and wanting to stop. So if the video is not for people who still need to be convinced, aren't sure, or maybe want to scale back. It's for people who they don't need to be convinced that it's a scourge. Pornography is terrible, and it's harmful, and there's nothing good to come out of it. The thing they want to do is to stop, but they're finding it difficult. And that's what I'm making this video in response to other videos that I've watched that either really just cover like how harmful it is to the people who are viewing it, to the people who are involved in it, and like the websites, like all. I mean, It could go on and on and on, and there's plenty of that out of those types of videos that are out there available for anybody interested to learn about the damage that it causes. And just like I said, I call it a crime against humanity and a true scourge. To anybody that's watching it, involved in it, in any way distributing it, it's just it is a crime against humanity. But so there's one aspect of that is being really described, the damage that it causes, and the other aspect is to just stop. You need to stop. What I saw there seemed to me to be a lack of really insight into how to get to a place of stopping. And this is why I'm making this video, and it's why I say true liberation. Because even there are the folks who will say to stop. There are the folks who will say, just pray. And then there are suggestions of you can download apps. You can they got like accountability. There's things that you could pay for and download. And what I would call that, I wouldn't call that true liberation, because it suggests that the premise is that you need to cut off access. If you had no access to it, then you couldn't get on it, and then you would be free from that. You would stop doing it, not because you can't access it. I mean, the only reason why you're free from it is because it's not an option, basically. And I would say that is often necessary when you're dealing with any addiction, whether it's alcohol, drugs, gambling. The most difficult part is that getting those first, I would say, 30 days abstinent, not acting out on the behavior, is very hard, very difficult to do. So if the utility of the mechanisms to limit or completely disallow access, that could be very helpful. It could be like needed, especially very early on. And I suppose the idea is, once that initial period of time of total abstinence is completed, then the cycle of craving has been interrupted, and it's much easier. A person is much less addicted because they've been separated from that activity. I mean, even in like substance abuse, people go to if it's alcohol, people go to detox for 5 days to be physically medically monitored, for them to be as they physically withdraw from the alcohol. And then a lot of times, I mean, it's not suggested that a person just do the physical withdrawal, the detox, and then go straight back to their home, because the relapse rate is like off the chart, that people very quickly resume drinking once they complete the physical detox. So they'll say from detox go to like a 30-day program. But even then, the success rates aren't great there either. Even when a person is separated and they go to a treatment for 30 days and they go to groups and it's all about relapse prevention, it's shockingly common that a person quickly relapses once they return home. So when I say what I'm saying is a true liberation, I'm going to go back to this to the 12 steps here, where it talks about the liberation, like what, even in the founders of AA, they wrote the book, it was published in the 1940s. They had this understanding that a personality change, the miracle of healing, of the consummation of those 12 steps. It says, having had a spiritual experience. So they do as the result of these steps. So these steps led to a spiritual experience, which could also be described as a radical personality change, where they no longer they would say they were restored to sanity, that they were, it wasn't about being shielded from temptation. Because they were restored to sanity, they were not, they were no more, they didn't, the desire for alcohol was removed. Like they would not desire alcohol, even if it was in front of them. Then they would desire drinking a cup of bleach or liquid Drano. Like they just knew for them it was poison. And so the reading goes, assuming we are spiritually fit, we can do all sorts of things alcoholics are not supposed to do. People have said we must not go where liquor is served. We must not have it in our homes. We must shun friends who drink. We must avoid movies which show people drinking. We must not go into bars. Our friends must hide their bottles if we go into their houses. We mustn't think or be reminded about alcohol at all. Our experience shows that this is not necessarily so. We meet these conditions every day. An alcoholic who cannot meet them still has an alcoholic mind. There is something the matter with his spiritual status. His only chance for sobriety would be someplace like the Greenland ice cap. And even then, someone might turn up with a bottle of scotch and ruin everything. Ask any woman who has sent her husband to distant places. On the theory, he would escape the alcohol problem. In our belief, any scheme of combating alcoholism which proposes to shield a sick man from temptation is doomed to failure. If the alcoholic tries to shield himself, he may succeed for a time, but he usually winds up with a bigger explosion than ever. We have tried these methods. These attempts to do the impossible have always failed. So that's an argument. It's not an argument against all the internet blocks, the things that will block that ability for a person to access the internet in and of itself. It's just saying that that's not the recipe for permanent, lifelong, like again, true liberation. It could be effective for a time, but if a person, just like how the reading says, if a person who's sober from alcohol is contingent on them never being offered alcohol, never seeing alcohol, never being in a place where they could serve alcohol, well, like, even like, good luck. Like, how can a person pull that off? Not only is this the fellowship, the AA, saying that that's not ideal, it's also not, there's an alternative. And the alternative is adapting a spiritual posture, doing the work to consummate the spiritual experience where it's not necessary to avoid all those places. And the language, it uses the language of like the step 2. There's 12 steps. Step 2 is Step 2 is came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Now, when it says a power greater than ourselves, it means God. The founders of AA and the 12-step movement, they were sensitive to the fact that there was a lot of people who were, in spite of severe deterioration due to their addiction, were still obstinate to the idea of religion, of somebody else like imposing a belief on them that they have to join this church or do this or do that. That, like, even the founder of AA, when he was being presented this idea of a spiritual solution, he assumed what was going to come after that was to join a particular church. And again, even though he was in dire physical, he was a very low bottom. Like, he would very likely not be alive in the following 12 months if he were to continue drinking as he was. But even in that, he still had the pride and the obstinacy, being obstinate about not wanting somebody else's beliefs to be imposed on him. And the person that was discussing these spiritual matters and this possibility of recovery through a spiritual means said a sentence that really changed the whole course of the founder's life, and it helped. And as a result of that conversation, the 12 steps were developed and have helped and continue to help millions of people. And it was, why don't you choose the God of your own understanding? That I'm not going to tell. If all you have to do is be willing to believe that there is a God. You don't even have to necessarily believe it's a willingness to believe that there is a God and it's not you. That's enough to make a start in a spiritual life, because otherwise the door is completely shut and there's no possibility for the sunlight of the Spirit to enter. So if a person is just willing to believe that there's a higher power, they could start on the spiritual path. Step 2 is, like I said, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves, so God, can restore us to sanity. So to be in need of the restoration of sanity, it assumes a person is not currently sane. If I believe that God can restore me to sanity, I'm acknowledging that I am in some way insane. And that could get people, you could associate. There's people who will be very aghast at the suggestion that they're somehow insane. Because you can think of insanity as like, psych ward, delusional thinking, like, straitjacket, padded room, hospitalization, insane. The insanity of active addiction can best be described as doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So it's with any kind of compulsion, it's like somehow that they, even though they have there's a person could acknowledge that, kind of sticking with the alcoholism, a person could have all these damaging effects because of their drinking, relationship problems, employment problems, legal problems, and they probably get to a point where they swear off alcohol, but then one day they go back and drink again. And so that's the idea of like, that's insane to keep doing. Why would you go back to drinking? Why would you even be attracted to drinking? Why would you even try to justify or continue to attempt to drink, knowing what the consequences have been over and over and over again? It's like reaching in, touching a hot stove over and over again, every time thinking some way, somehow you're not going to get burned. But every time you get burned, eventually you think like that's insane. There's also a useful, what I found to be a very useful analogy of alcoholism as a type of allergy. So it's described as an obsession of the mind and an allergy of the body. The obsession of the mind is that they could somehow drink without getting burned. But the allergy of the body is that once they have even a single drink of alcohol, they get an overwhelming compulsion, they call it a phenomenon of craving. That any amount of alcohol creates this phenomenon of craving, of overwhelming craving to continue to drink until drunkenness, and usually like extreme drunkenness. So even if a person says like, okay, I'm going to have a drink or 2 drinks, like they have that one or two, and they have that's their intention. They have that 1 or 2 drinks, but now they have this phenomenon of craving, which they continue to drink and get to the point of drunkenness. So you could say that it's not that alcohol is a problem, it's drunkenness is the problem. But a true alcoholic can't drink without getting drunk. So I know I'm talking a lot about alcohol and the 12 steps, but I want to, like I said, I'm going to tie this into addiction to pornography and masturbation, and I am going to call it a type of addiction. Some people would argue that. They say, well, if you call it an addiction, you're kind of making an excuse. Like, oh, you can't, I want to stop, but I'm addicted, so I can't stop. I call it an addiction. What I'm saying is that it could become an addiction in that even when a person earnestly, honestly desires to stop, they continue to fall into that pattern. And I think this is what a lot of people experience. Like, and then just to suggest to somebody, well, you just say no, just stop. It's like telling somebody who's a severe alcoholic, like, why don't you just stop, or why don't you just like slow down? If they are truly an alcoholic, that's not possible without an intervention, without a divine intervention. And I would say the same is true with any addiction, and with a sex addiction, compulsive porn use. So when we talk about the sanity versus insanity. And like I just mentioned, the alcohol, that it's a useful analogy to think of alcohol as a type of, not so much a poison in that it's not poison for everybody, but for the alcoholic, it's like they develop a type of allergy. And I know it's a metaphor, it's not like scientifically, medically accurate, but it's useful. Excuse me, it's a useful metaphor because like if I was addicted to, I'm sorry, not addicted, if I had an allergy to almonds, and every time I ate any kind of almonds or food that contained almonds, I got very, very sick, to the point where like I almost die, and like I have multiple hospitalizations, and someone like I get released from the hospital after another long hospitalization where I came close to dying, and I'm with a friend talking about, yeah, I have to, stay away from certain foods, but then later on I say like, man, I could really go for some almond milk or something like that. Like a person, my friend who knew about my condition, knew how much damage, how allergic I am, and what that does to me. But here I am asking for it, like going for it, like it's no big deal. That's where you say like, okay, that is the insanity. Even though I get very sick, I still think of a way to try to like act like I'm not going to get sick from it. So being restored to sanity is to have a sane, to have that right perspective, to understand what that is to me, what it would do to me. And this is where the passage of the book I read to say, like, if a person is of sound spiritual mind, they no longer have that alcoholic mind where they need to avoid alcohol, because they know they could even says like that an alcoholic can have alcohol in their house. Like if I was a recovering alcoholic and for whatever reason there was alcohol in my house, and somebody who might say to me, like, because conventional wisdom is like the reading said, even back then, it's probably not wise to keep alcohol in your house. Like at any moment you might have a bad day and just see it and drink it. But if I am a recovering alcoholic and I have consummated the 12 steps to the point of the spiritual awakening and a restoration of sanity in respect to alcohol, if I had alcohol in my house, like and somebody says like, oh, maybe you shouldn't have that there, I could say, yeah, but I have liquid, I keep liquid Drano in my house. That would be the equivalent of somebody saying, like, are you sure? Oh, you have liquid Drano in your cabinet. Like, you sure you should have that? It's like, yeah. Why? Well, why wouldn't I keep that? Why wouldn't I? What reason would I have to not have that? Say, oh, you might out of nowhere have this overwhelming desire to drink it. And I'd say like, well, if that's the case, I mean, I for a person to do that, they would clearly like not be sane to do that. So like, I wouldn't, a person who's in that true liberation wouldn't desire alcohol no matter what the circumstances were, the same way that they wouldn't look at a bottle of Drano and think like, oh man, I really think I want to chug that. Because that's the restoration. They have a sane, ordered posture toward alcohol. I'm almost 25 minutes into this video. I'm really trying to get to this point of, okay, so how does this apply to sex addiction or like internet pornography, addiction to internet pornography? I would say true liberation in the same sense of how I described what is true liberation, and with alcohol for the alcoholic. The goal, it's possible to have true liberation toward sex relations. And how does that apply? It's like, what is like this idea of sanity and insanity? Sexual sobriety is no sex with anyone other than one's spouse, including oneself. And that's the definition of sexual sobriety as described by the 12-step fellowship Sexaholics Anonymous, and it really dovetails with the Catholic teaching of human sexuality. The only difference being, well, the sane posture towards sex is that it is unitive and or procreative. It's unitive in that it could only occur between a husband and a wife, and it's procreative in that it's open to life. So getting to a place of true liberation is to see, just like true liberation for the alcoholic is to have the right posture and attitude toward alcohol, what it is for them, which is they have a severe allergy, it's a toxin to them. True liberation of our sex life is to see that any sex that's non-unitive and or non-procreative is disordered and unhealthy and harmful. So there isn't nearly as much as much of a temptation to act. Same way an alcoholic in recovery who's restored to a right mind, sane mind, they're not tempted to drink alcohol because they know what alcohol is to them. Like, they would no more drink alcohol, beer, scotch, whatever their drink of choice was when they were active drinkers. They now see it for what it is, which for them is, like I said, a terrible poison. And because their liberation from alcohol was a healing from God's grace, to pick up that drink would be, it's not just, it is that poison, but it's also an affront to God who healed them from that affliction because they asked they prayed, they asked for it to be relieved, and now they're going to willingly pick it back up. That becomes another aspect of sobriety, of the commitment to continued sobriety. So with sex, we want to get to that point of what, like I said, true liberation is to see any sex that's non-unitive or non-procreative. We want to be restored to that right ordered mindset so that there isn't that same temptation to hop on a website or to act, to even look with lust on another person who isn't our, like, what's going to say, like, to lust, like, that isn't our spouse, but we ought not lust after our spouse either. But just to have that, it's not even like so much of like develop like a disgust response. It's just, you don't, because the temptation is to act because it gives like that instant gratification. It's pleasurable. It's a relief. Just, that's the temptation of somebody who has an alcoholic mind. They obsess about that one drink. They think about the relief of that one drink, but they don't think it all the way through. That's what another aspect of maintaining sobriety and abstinence is, to think it all the way through. Don't think about the pleasure of that first. Think it all the way through, like how you feel afterwards. And non-unitive, non-procreative sex, sex is unitive. So it's almost like I want to go back and say, you can't have sex without some type of union. Or if you're masturbating to pornography, you're fantasizing about sex that's not truly unitive. And if you think about two substances that come together and become one, if you ever attempt to separate, it's going to cause harm. So that's like the posture of that's the movement toward true liberation, is to see sex for what it is, which is unitive or procreative, and to so kind of going back to the 12 steps, you say, what is it to be restored to sanity with the 12 steps of AA is, if I'm an alcoholic, I'm restored to sanity. Somebody offers me a drink, I say no thank you. I'm not tempted. I'm not having a hard time. It's not a struggle, because I want it. If I was deathly allergic to a certain type of food, if somebody offered me if a food that I know I have an allergy to, I wouldn't like flip out and run away, but I would say no thank you, and I would probably take particular care to make sure that I wasn't exposed to that. That's what the restoration of sanity is to alcohol. To be of right mind, to have ordered, to be of right mind with a sex desire, is any thought of non-unitive sex is equally kind of like, is not tempting, because there, by God's grace, we've been restored to sanity to know that non-unitive sex is not attractive. And that's all the apps that will limit internet use, the people who are like not using their phones, or like having that accountability partners to kind of, I'm not knocking that. I'm not saying that that's not useful, but I will say that it's imperative to move toward that, a place of true liberation, which could only come from God, which is that rightly ordered posture, and a real disinterest in seeing the truth for what the sexual act is, which, like, as again I keep saying, it's unitive and it's procreative. Everything with sex addiction is non-unitive and non-procreative. So we want to get to that mindset of being unattracted to, uninterested in sex that's non-unitive. Like, and it doesn't even require like disgust or a distaste. It's just like, no, that's why non-unitive sex is just like ridiculous. It's disordered. It's like, and it's harmful. So why I wouldn't want that, like the same way I wouldn't reach and touch that burner on the stove. Like, it's insane. The same way a recovering alcoholic, they could drive right past the liquor store, they could go to a restaurant and there's alcohol. Somebody who doesn't know that they're an alcoholic can offer them a drink, and they're not tempted. They're not like, struggling with this thought of, man, I really want a drink, because they have been restored to sanity. They know what drinking is to them. They know what that alcohol would do to them. So it's not difficult. They don't have to make a big deal out of it. They just respectfully say no. So we could get that. I am convinced that it can be done with like our relationship, anyone's relationship to sex and pornography. And like I said, if a person is in the early stages of abstaining, it could be very necessary for them to have those limits. But you want to work to a place spiritually to whether or not those limits are there or not. Because like the day could come where I've talked to people that they stumbled across an old phone that they didn't even know they had, and they had limits on everything else. But it's almost like being dependent on having those blockers. Like, that's the only reason I'm sexually sober, is because I have total block there's no access to it. I would say that, just like earlier, going back to that reading of the book about people who have with alcoholism, that could be very necessary and useful in the beginning, but like long term, you got to imagine that the day will come where that's not the case. A person could go like on a business trip and then go like log on and just somehow have the thought that, wow, all for a long time everything I had access to blocked these things, me from accessing this, but now in this place I do have access. And if a person isn't spiritually sound, they still have that mindset of the addiction, then once they are aware of accessibility, that urge will really emerge very strong. So like I said, do the work in the early stages, the blocks, the accountability, but don't close yourself off from the hope and strive for that true liberation, which is the restoration of that, and think of it in the context of the posture of the sane, sound-minded, ordered posture toward all sexual acts is that they're unitive and procreative. Non-unitive, non-procreative sex is not is number one, damaging and harmful, and we want to cooperate with God's grace to restore us to that mindset. So even if it was right in front of us and available, we turn away.